I was teaching a class in, I don't remember what, and a guy came into the classroom late. He had a kind of a baby face, but he was otherwise unremarkable. I guess he was probably about 30 years old. He sat in the back of the room, and he began to stare at me intensely. Now, it's normal for participants in a training program to make occasional eye contact with the instructor, but this staring, this wasn't normal. There was something about this guy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. There, he's staring at me again. What is up with him? At 10:15, I took a break, and the baby-faced guy walked up to the front of the room where I was standing. He was making direct eye contact now, and he had a hint of a smile on his face. "Bill," he said, "don't you remember me? It's Bing from Belgrade. We got assaulted together. Don't you remember?" Memories came flashing back to me. Yes, Bing from Belgrade. Of course, that's who he was. Belgrade was my first overseas assignment in the Foreign Service. This was the late 1980s. Yugoslavia was still intact as a country, but just barely. There were ethnic clashes everywhere, sometimes even violence in the street. The media was full of stories of atrocities that one group had committed against another. Some of the stories were real, some of them were imagined. The Serbian press regularly ran stories about Albanian terrorists who put poison powder in Serbian schools to poison the innocent Serbian school children. I never saw any of those stories substantiated, but all of the Serbs believed them to be true. Bing and I belong to an international running club called the Hash House Harriers. Some of you may have heard of the Hash. The way it works is you run a different course every week. Somebody goes out early and puts marks on the ground, X's and arrows and dots and circles to make a kind of a maze. And then the runners come along and they look at the marks on the ground and they have to try and figure out which way to go. Different hash clubs around the world have different ways of drawing those marks on the ground, but most of the clubs use baking flour to do it, and that's what we did in Belgrade. It never occurred to any of us, least of all me, that somebody could see that baking flour on the ground and think that it was poison intended to kill innocent Serbian school children. One Sunday morning, Bing and I got up early to set the course for the Hash. We were trotting through a residential neighborhood. We both had our bags of flour. I was bent over making a mark on the ground, intent on what I was doing, and I heard a thump, thump, and a grunt. I looked up. To my horror, an old man had grabbed Bing by the sleeve. He had a metal rod in his hand. It looked like a tire iron. He was hitting Bing on the back with it. Bing was standing there motionless. I couldn't figure out if he was too stunned to move or if he couldn't escape the old man's grip. Suddenly, I was full of adrenaline. I had to do something. I didn't even stop to think about what made sense. I ran over to them. I swung my bag of flour at the old man. I hit him. It seemed like a futile gesture, but it did get him to let go of Bing, and he whirled around, and he spun to face me, and he swung his tire iron at me, and he hit me in the forehead, and I could feel my face covering with blood. I had a hard time seeing out of my right eye. But at that point, it was actually a standoff. Bing and I were young and fit. The old man didn't look like any kind of an athlete. I think all three of us realized that Bing and I could simply run away from him if we wanted to. So the three of us stood there and we called for the police. The old man stayed with us. He thought he was going to get a medal for saving the lives of innocent Serbian school children. The old man did end up going to trial. He was acquitted. The court found that while his actions were misguided, they were simply based on a misunderstanding, and his desire to defend the homeland against Albanian terrorists was commendable. All of these memories came flooding back to me as I stood in the classroom, shaking Bing's hand. "Bing," I said, "it's been a long time. How are you?" But one of my coworkers had overheard us, and She was curious. "You guys got assaulted in Belgrade?" she said. "What happened?" Bing and I looked at each other. "You tell her," I said. "Well," he said, "we were setting a course for the Hash House Harriers, and we were going through a residential neighborhood, and we were being followed by these two guys." "It wasn't two guys," I said. "It was one guy." "It was two guys," he said. "It was one crazy old Serb," I said. "It was definitely two guys," he said. I was stunned. He continued. "So we were setting the course for the Hash House Harriers, and we were being followed by these two guys, and they had knives." "He didn't have a knife," I said. "He had a tire iron." "They both had knives," he said. "He had a tire iron, and first he hit you with it, and then when I went to try and help you out, he hit me." "They definitely both had knives," I said. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say, so I decided to shut up and listen. This was definitely Bing. This was Bing from Belgrade. It was the same guy. There was no mistaking him. That was him. But as he told the story of the attack, he got it wrong in every significant detail. How is that possible? I went home that night and I told my wife the story about bizarre encounter in the classroom. She hadn't been with us that Sunday morning, but she remembered the incident. She remembered Bing, and she remembered the blood. She remembered the stitches. We both agreed that it was just really, really strange. But I couldn't shake the suspicion that maybe that same night, maybe even that same hour, Bing was talking to his wife, or his girlfriend, or a buddy, and telling them about his bizarre encounter in the classroom and how wrong-headed I was. He seemed so sure of himself. And I was the guy who got hit in the head. Since then, I've experienced this same phenomenon a number of times. The phenomenon where another person and I have a shared experience and yet have very different recollections of that shared experience. I find this fascinating. I've analyzed it from every possible angle. And I've come up with the only logical conclusion that's supported by all the facts. My conclusion is this: my memory is flawless, and everybody else's memory is messed up. What else could it possibly be? So I'm sharing this important conclusion with all of you tonight, but regrettably, I have no confidence that you will remember it accurately.